All right, so today's guest speaker is a lawyer, a young man named Trent Swinehart. And I have known Trent for most of his life. I'm good friends with his parents, and I actually coached Trent in Little League. And hopefully he's not going to tell any stories about any of my behavior at Little League games while we're here. But Trent went to Columbus High. He's a native from Columbus. He went to the University of Georgia Law School, and he graduated last May. Passed the bar and is working for 2 years as a law clerk for Judge Clay Land, who is a federal judge here in Columbus. So we talked a lot about throughout the semester about federal court system and state court system. Trent is working in the federal court system. He's going to tell you some of the things that they do and some of the things that they see. Trent is probably one of the smartest kids I've ever known. He's not a kid anymore, smartest young men I've ever known. But more importantly than that, he is one of the best people that I've ever known. So I'm excited for y'all to hear from him, hear some of his perspective, his story, and to be able to ask questions to him. We've got plenty of time to do that when we're over. So y'all help me welcome Trent Swinehart.
Hey, y'all. That was a really kind introduction, Tom. I did not expect that. As he said, I'm Trent. My first memory of Tom was I was friends with Tom's son, and we played in the same Little League team together. He was 2 years older than I was, and Tom coached. And he, I think you're painting real quick.
Oh, all right. Time out. This is another special guest. Come on down, Blaine. Time out. So one of my former students, Blaine Harp, is in the room, and he's here because he brought me a painting that he did for me. And everybody say hey to Blaine. Blaine, this is my current crop of business law students. You have any advice for them?
Well, enjoy it while it lasts, because I'm at the end, and now it's like, well, what do I do next? So have fun.
Blaine is graduating in a couple weeks, and he has been accepted to the University of Alabama's master's program, right, in sports administration, right. And so Blaine is an artist, and he is an artist who paints and draws with his mouth, and his work is unbelievable. So I'm excited. Can I show everybody?
Mm-hmm.
All right. This is what Blaine made for me. This is a portrait of one of my favorite people, Stetson Bennett IV. And
your wife and asked her if she would let you put it anywhere other than the bathroom. So we'll see what she
right,
says.
my wife's an Auburn fan, and she makes me put all my Georgia stuff in the bathroom. So maybe we can hang this up somewhere else.
I push for it. We'll see.
All right, and you still accept commission work, right?
Yes.
Yeah. If anybody's interested in getting Blaine to do some work for him, he's awesome. Isn't that cool? Yes. All right. I'll show my online folks. Stet. All right. Thank you, Blaine, and good luck.
Thanks.
We'll see you soon.
Yes, sir.
I appreciate it. I'm going to cherish that.
All right.
All right. Good luck, Blaine. Thank you. I didn't plan that, so that was awesome, though. All right, Trent, sorry about that.
Oh, no worries at all. I kind of want to go get a closer look at this.
Oh, okay.
That's pretty awesome.
Go Dogs.
Go Dogs.
Roll Tide.
But anyways, yeah, my first memory with Tom was playing Little League under him, where he was our coach. I think we won we played at Peach Little League. We won the Peach Little League championship his son's 12-year-old year, my 10-year-old year, and then we lost a heartbreaker in the city championship. So we won't talk much more about that.
We were robbed.
We were robbed. We were robbed. So what's up? Northern on top. I'm trying to think who won it. I think it was
Northern.
It was no. I thought it was Losey.
Was it American?
I think it was Pioneer. It was.
It might have been Pioneer
because they had Tony Losey, who went and pitched at Georgia,
Yeah.
and they didn't throw him against us. They threw a little junk ball pitcher, and he beat us.
Oh, I know which one that was.
Yeah,
That's Pioneer.
I think it was Pioneer. So
we weren't robbed.
yeah, we were in over our skis.
Yeah.
But when Tom asked me to talk to y'all, and my original response was, "What am I going to talk to y'all about?" I'm 25. Some of y'all may be older than me. I don't really have a ton of life experience, but I texted my little brother. My little brother's a junior in college at Princeton right now. And I said, James, what would you want to hear? Like, what wisdom could I impart to a group of college students, and he kind of gave me a little outline of what he would like to hear. So I based some off that, some of my own personal experiences, and so hopefully y'all get to learn at least a little something. I'm impressed you are here the day before the last class before a final, so appreciate y'all showing up. But a little about me. So as Tom said, I'm from Columbus. I lived here from when I was born until when I went off to college. I went to the University of Georgia for undergrad. A huge Georgia fan. Went my senior year. I went to every single Georgia football game, both home and away. And that was when we broke the curse and finally beat Alabama, which we haven't since. And then I stayed in Athens and went to Georgia Law School after that. And then, as Tom said, I finished up in May. Big milestone in between those years was I got married to my wife in December, who is also from here, who I had a huge crush on throughout all of high school, as I think most people did my age. And thankfully, she came around when I was in college. I'd grown up a little at that point. And, we dated throughout my time in law school, which I'll touch on a little bit. And then we got married during my third semester, graduated in May, and then took the bar. And now I'm past the bar, and now I'm working full time for Judge Clay Land. So I'm just going to leave you. I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience starting when I was in y'all's shoes, when I was a college student just a few years ago, and then transitioned to law school because I know it's a business law class. So I'm assuming at least a couple of you may have aspirations or are thinking about law school, just my experience through that. And then I'll talk a little bit about what my job has looked like these first 3 months that I've worked there, and leave y'all with some tidbits that I wished I had known when I was in y'all's shoes. So without further ado, I'll get going. As I said, I went to University of Georgia. This was a dream of mine to go there. I majored in finance there, and those 4 years were truly some of the best years of my life. I think when I look back on those 4 years, one thing that stands above the rest is that's really where my faith began to blossom, which is maybe a little peculiar in college, but for me, it was a really impactful experience, and I felt like my relationship with Christ was growing at a level that it had not before. And as my faith began to grow, I think my perspectives on a lot of things began to change a little bit. And one of those was just how I viewed my career and what I wanted to do. You see, going into college, I had no aspirations to go to law school. I really didn't. It wasn't even on my radar. But I felt like my purpose kind of began to change. And there's this one quote that I love by a saint of old that kind of changed my perspective on, okay, what do I want to do post-college, which I'm sure is a question a lot of y'all are wrestling with right now. And it is, the glory of God is man fully alive. And so for me, I was like, I want to go chase something I'm passionate about and try to make a difference for good in this world. And I think you can certainly do that with a finance degree. For me, I kind of felt like that really wasn't what I was called to do. Just crunching numbers all day. That wasn't something I was really passionate about. And so I was I didn't really know what I was going to do. And so after my junior year of college, which is usually a big internship summer and getting prepared to go into the workforce, I instead went to Bozeman, Montana with 3 of my closest friends. And we lived in a camper, and we didn't even have jobs when we went out there. We just kind of went and parked in National Forest land and would bebop around trying to dodge the National Forest Service. And eventually we got, after multiple warnings but no tickets, we were able to make it through the whole summer. And I worked on a golf course out there as a maintenance man. And that summer was one of the more impactful summers of my life. Again, up to this point, 3 years, 75% of the way done with college. And I have law school is not on my radar. And during that time, just through my own personal quiet time, I was going through the book of Proverbs and the book of Isaiah. And that was just transforming my mindset of, I'm seeing that the God that I put my faith in was a God of justice, and not just for those who may look the part. In fact, it makes pretty clear throughout all of Scripture, and especially those 2 books, like this quartet of the vulnerable, the poor, the fatherless, the widow, and the foreigner. And those 4 categories of people just kept coming up over and over. And I'm like, I want to do something to help like this group of people, the ones that the world has often cast aside. And so at the same time, I was reading a book called Just Mercy. Have any of y'all seen the book or watched the movie? Yeah, Michael B. Jordan's one of my favorite actors, and he plays Brian Stevenson, the attorney in it. So would highly recommend. But just in my own personal reading time, I was reading Just Mercy. I'm reading this incredible story about a guy who was partly motivated by his faith, who went and represented people on death row who he believed were wrongfully incarcerated. And to give the story away, he goes and he is able to find out that this guy who was on death row, who's a man in Alabama, did not actually commit the crime that he was accused of, and he was completely exonerated and no longer faced death row. And I'm like, whoa, this is like, these two things are lining up right now of like, this is an occupation, a future occupation where I can maybe use this desire to bring justice to those who have been cast aside in this world. And so this idea came into my head, and I'm like, could I go to law school? And at the time, it was kind of outrageous. I mean, I was 75% of the way done. I haven't even considered what the possibility of law school would look like. At the time, I actually thought it was 4 years. Any of y'all are wondering, it's actually 3, which I soon found out just through a quick Google search. And I was like, this idea came into my head. And so I was like, I'm going to sit on this for a little bit because this may seem kind of rash to all of a sudden just kind of, I mean, I guess my degree was still valuable, but just not pursue anything in that realm and just go in a completely different direction. And so I sought some wise counsel. I spent about a month in prayer, and I was like, okay, like let's see where I'm feeling at the end of the summer. At the end of the summer, I was like, this idea in my head won't leave. And I talked to my aunt, who was an attorney, who actually graduated and worked with Tom for a little bit from Georgia Law. And she was able to kind of point me in the right direction, was like, Trent, I don't think this is an outrageous idea. Like, I think you should go for it. And so I decided to go for it, leaving Bozeman, Montana after a summer spent in a camper. And so what that looked like for me was that I figured that if I'm going to say that I'm going to do this thing, I might as well go all in and make sure that I cross every T and dot every I. And so I don't have to ask, what if? What if I hadn't done this? What if I hadn't met up with that person? So for me, that looked like I went through this process, which I'll talk a little bit about. It's called the UGA Scholars Program. So essentially, which is now open to all USG schools. So people from Columbus State, Kennesaw State, you name your USG program or USG college can get, there's a certain amount of spots they allocate to Georgia students who have a certain GPA and a certain standardized test score, and you can get in without having to take the LSAT. And so the application for me was just getting some letters of rec and writing an essay about why I wanted to go to law school. So I started meeting with people and starting to think, who are some influential figures that could help me out, maybe get into law school. So I started doing that, meeting with people, collecting my letters of rec, and I spent a lot of time working on my essay. And I sent it in. I was like, all right, here we go. And I'll never forget, one morning I was in the gym and I just checked my email and I see, congratulations, you've gotten in. That was October of my senior year. And I was like, dang, this is crazy. In late June, I thought that law school was 4 years and I wasn't going. And by October, I was like, man, I just committed the next 3 years of my life to this. This is all kind of crazy. And so I ended up graduating from the University of Georgia, which again, we won the national championship that year and broke the curse in 21. And then I graduated in May of 22. I went and did a summer doing missions in India. And then I started law school in August of 22. And so just like that, 1 year after this experience in Montana, I had began law school. And my dream was to go and basically provide legal services to those who otherwise wouldn't be able to afford it or wouldn't have access to it. And so coming into law school, I had heard plenty of horror stories about how bad it was and how miserable the time commitment was. I can promise you on the other side, it really isn't that bad. I mean, it's not like a cakewalk, but I came in with the mindset that it was my full-time job. Many of my friends had gone and worked full-time jobs straight out of college, and I was like, my hours should match theirs. So I came in saying I'm going to study every day from 8:30 to 6:30. And I soon actually found out this was more than enough. This was almost overkill. And so I don't know if any of y'all who are interested have heard these horror stories. I'm here to quell those or kind of put aside those fears and say it's not that much. And my mind, and then as I went through this, my hours actually went down, but like y'all are probably going through right now, finals around the corner, I had kind of ramp them up during busy season. However, I can say that not everyone else came in with the same mindset. I think it helped me a lot just because I had a good idea of what was coming. Some viewed it, I think, that if they put in the same amount of work that they did in undergrad, they would be just fine. And for me in undergrad, I can honestly say I probably wasn't working very hard. And it was kind of a last-second steadier and certainly was not working full-time job hours. And people who did this, I've found often didn't do so well and found themselves pretty miserable throughout it. And I also think that during law school, I had heard that I won't have a life outside of law school. I can also tell you that this was not the case at all. I think I did have a life outside of law school. I started dating my now wife my second semester of my senior year of college. At that time, she was in PA school down in Mobile, Alabama. And we were doing 6 hours of long distance and got to see her once every 3 or 4 weeks. And very rarely did I have to pull out a textbook or read. Just with a little bit of preparation, I was able to knock all that and still have quality time with her. I still remained, I was a young life leader in college and still was a young life leader in law school. And so I was able to have some volunteer commitments outside of it. And I still had a lot of fun. I went to Georgia football games. I went to our back-to-back natty. I flew out to Los Angeles with a group of friends during law school, skipped a couple classes and went to a game, and it was not an issue. I went and made road trips to Austin, Texas when we beat Texas last year. I made road trips to Starkville when Georgia beat Mississippi State, and I went to Knoxville to watch us beat Tennessee. So I'm here to say that, like, in law school and really in whatever your next endeavor is, it doesn't have to consume you. You can still certainly have a lot of fun, free time on the side, as long as you get your work done in the hours that you set aside to get it done. And I think a lot of this just comes down to perspective, like most things. I came in with the perspective, law school is my full-time job, and I'm going to work a certain amount of hours, and I'm going to work to the best of my ability. And I enjoyed it. I had a great experience. People who thought it was going to be a walk in the park or that they didn't have to put in much work, I think they were oftentimes pretty miserable. So after my first year, I actually came back home and I spent half my summer working for a firm in Columbus. And I spent half my time working with yours truly, Tom. I got to see.
Oh, I left out that part.
Yeah.
Sorry. He was a great employee.
Yeah, Tom helped me buy a ring for my wife. So thank you, Tom. But that summer was very impactful for me because I had spent this year learning about what the law is, but I actually got to see how that played out in real life. And I think there were two really cool things that came out of that summer. One was I got to see the work that Tom did. I don't know how much Tom has talked to you about the work that he does, but I personally found it very, very neat and cool to see someone who was representing the exact kind of population who I wanted to represent in court. And I got to see Tom do that very effectively firsthand. And he'll probably downplay that. I'm sure he does, but
you're talking about juvenile court stuff, right?
Yes.
Parents who,
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you want me to go in a little?
I mean, you can if you
want.
Yeah.
So Tom oftentimes, I don't know if he's talked to y'all too much about it, but he would represent parents who were, it's called dependency cases in juvenile court, which is basically the process in which the Department of Family and Child Services comes in and they start the process over some statutory reason that a parent has either neglected or abused their child. And they start the process of separating this child from their parents. And Tom's job was to basically represent the parents in these proceedings. Because under Georgia Constitution, they all, even if they can't afford it, are allowed to have an attorney appointed for them. And so Tom volunteers his time as one of those attorneys who works or who represents these parents who are facing having their children getting taken away. Is that pretty?
Yep.
Pretty accurate description?
That is.
So I got to work a lot in that field and get to see how Tom interacts with people, which was really, really cool and fulfilling and showed me that, hey, this dream I have, there's people out there living it out. And second, I also was offered a 2-year clerkship to come back home and work with Judge Land at the time. And I didn't really expect that to happen. I was very excited. My now wife was very excited, especially because she wanted to come home. And then when I had this employment opportunity, she was like, "Oh, this is great." And so I accepted my 2-year clerkship with him that would begin 2 years later, August of 2025. And so as I progressed in law school after that summer, I had this vision, like I said, where I wanted to represent those who otherwise wouldn't be able to afford it. And so I wanted to take classes that aligned with this vision and basically allow my studies to further prepare me to go into the practice I wanted to do. And a big reason I went to UJ Law was because they had these clinical programs that allowed you to do that. And there's two in particular that I'll talk about. One was called the Family Justice Clinic. So Family Justice Clinic was a legal clinic that existed to serve survivors of domestic violence who otherwise couldn't afford an attorney. This often looked like representing clients in protective orders against abusers who had physically or emotionally abused them, and helping them in other family law related issues. So I'll share a hard story about that and a cool story. So one hard story was I was representing this lady, and she had had a history of domestic abuse with this one partner, and she had finally said, I'm tired of this. Now is enough. And so she came to us seeking representation, and I met with her. And how it works is you basically get a 30-day protective order that says there's no hearing. You just go and apply for it for the judge and show him, hey, she's been abused. And then he'll grant a 30-day protective order. And then you'll go back in 30 days and see if that's extended to 12 months. And so we got the 30-day protective order. And 3 days before the hearing, we were having our final little check-in. And she comes to me, and she comes to meet up. And she's like, I don't want this anymore. I want to go back to him. I believe him. And that's what ended up happening. I mean, our job was to represent the client and to do what she wanted to do. And so I had to go into court 3 days later and say, Your Honor, she actually does not want to proceed with that. And unfortunately, I think we found just through studies and literature that we read through that clinic, that's a very common thing, these cycles of domestic violence. And I get it. It's, she spent so much time with this person, and then he's telling her that he's changed. He's changed, and she wants to believe him. I never had contact with her again. I hope that he had changed that time, but unfortunately, studies show that often doesn't happen. So that was a really hard story. Now, a really cool story at that time was there was this grandmother named Miss Jackson, and Miss Jackson was wonderful. I got to know her throughout. I spent my whole entire second year there working on this case a lot, and she was trying to get custody of these children who she had raised since birth. They were her biological daughter who was kind of out of the picture. They were her children, and she had done this for years and years and years without any financial or legal assistance. She had no actual legal custody of her children, and through our representation, we were able to get her. By the time I finished up, she had full custody of those children, receiving financial assistance in doing so. And so that was a really cool story of, hey, there's some hard stories out there, and there's also some really, really cool stories that I got to experience. During my third year fall, I also took part in the CEASE clinic, which is the Child Endangerment and Sexual Exploitation Clinic. So basically with this clinic, we worked with victims of child sexual abuse through civil cases seeking money damages against their people who had abused them sexually, through dependency cases, which I explained a little bit about, but we'd represent primarily the children in these cases who had been sexually abused. And then we represented them in criminal record relief, which Georgia law basically has certain provisions where if you can prove that a crime you committed happened directly because of you were being sex trafficked or labor trafficked, you can get that expunged from your record. And oftentimes prostitution is considered a crime, but if someone's getting sex trafficked, that's not on them. And so we represented them in those different areas of law. And I'll kind of share one hard story and one cool story again about this. So hard story, main case I worked on during my time there was a girl named Malaysia. Malaysia was 17 years old this time last year and had been through the foster care system and had gone through many, many different foster care parents, and she had been a victim of sexual abuse by multiple people had abused her, and as a direct result of that, her mental, just her ability to hold it together was definitely diminished. And we had a hearing before a judge. This was a dependency case, and we had a hearing before a judge. And this was my first hearing, like representing her. So I hadn't met her in person. I'd only talked to her on the phone. And her social worker at the time started listing off all the things that Malaysia had done wrong, all the ways she had disobeyed and caused issues for them. And Malaysia got triggered. She blew up, started screaming, cussing, threatening, and just starts yelling up and screaming. It was horrendous. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. Like, I'm like, hey, like, it's okay, sit down. She's unconsolable. She ended up having to get pulled out by the court marshals, and they had to escort her out because she was no longer able to contain herself in there. And I'll never forget, it was kind of cool to see how the judge responded, because I was like, oh my gosh, is the judge going to have her arrested for contempt of court? Like, she just blew up at these proceedings. And the judge looked at her. She's a judge in Savannah. We were down in Savannah. And she said, can you blame her? The whole system had failed her and turned their back on her every step of the way when she has done nothing but cry for help. And for me, it was obviously super, super, super hard to see that happen, but it was also really cool to see that there are advocates and people in positions of power who realize that, hey, this is not her fault that she blew up. This is because she has been failed time and time and time again. And the real issue is not her behavior. It's what led to her behavior being like that. And so it helped show me how to recognize these signs of help, even if they're not crying for help. Like, what are some signs that people exhibit when they need help, and how can the system actually be proved to truly help people in Malaysia's position instead of just pay lip service to it. Now, a cool story, a good story, because that was kind of sad. CEAS, as I said, they also represented victims in civil lawsuits against people who had formerly sexually abused them. And this is under the Georgia Hidden Predators Act, not to dig too deep in the law, but essentially it just provides survivors of child sexual abuse a statutory civil cause of action where they could sue their perpetrators for money damages. And so there was this case that actually it came to its resolution in October of this year. And I actually did not work on this case, but I wanted to share it because it's a really cool story. And two of my students who I was in the clinic at the same time with actually got to work and make opening and closing statements before a jury. And they received a $4.3 million jury verdict against this young girl's father who had committed acts of sexual abuse and exploitation against her. And I was able to do some work on cases kind of adjacent to this one. This was not one that I worked on again, but it was cool to see that the work that CEAS was doing paid off in a big way. But I do want to make one little thing to note, and the CEAS clinic would say this, is that they oftentimes go to trial not because they get not because they got $4.3 million. It's because it's a really cool time of healing for the survivor of child sexual abuse to be able to have a voice and share their experiences with the public and actually be believed. Because a lot of times these people, they share their experiences and people just sweep them under the rug and are like, oh, she's young. She's not telling the truth. And now it's a cool opportunity, and one that's very hard, but one that provides much healing for these survivors where they're able to share what happened to them and actually have people listen to them and believe them. And so those were kind of two clinics that I did during my second and third year of law school, which again are kind of I was trying to build, all working towards this goal of one day hoping to open something of my own here in Columbus. And then my last semester in law school, I kind of mentioned earlier, I moved home and married my wife, Gigi, in December. And I externed with a state court judge named Pete Temesgen here, who has become a really close friend of mine. And it was really cool to see the common legal issues that came before him, specifically in Columbus, each and every day. And then I graduated in May and spent all summer studying for the bar, and took it at the end of July and got good news at the end of September, and I started working for Judge Land in August. So that was a lot about law school. So now I'll talk a little bit about just how my experience has been with my clerkship thus far. common question I get from both lawyers and non-lawyers alike is, what is a clerkship? What do you do? And I think the best explanation I can give is Judge Lane has 3 clerks, and we all kind of serve as his right-hand man, or we're his right-hand man. So basically a certain number of cases are assigned to me, and I'm tasked with making sure and following these cases and making sure they stay on track and perform legal research and writing for any issues that may come up with these cases. So on a daily basis, I read a lot of cases, read a lot of case law, and draft orders. So a lot of research and writing. And thus far, it has been a really, really cool experience. I think it's one of the best ways in which you can translate your legal education into actual practice, because this is what you kind of did in law school. You read a lot of cases and you would draft briefs about it. And I get to see firsthand what a good lawyer looks like in the city of Columbus, and also what some bad lawyers look like. And I think, if anything, the bad lawyers may be even more of a learning experience for me, because I can get to see this is not what I want to be. That's not what I want to do when I start practicing. And I also get to see and learn from a federal judge. He was appointed by President Bush in 2002. So he's been on the bench for almost 25 years, which is very, very long. So in the federal system, judges are appointed until they want to stop. In the state court system, you've got to run for re-election every so often. And so it's been really cool to see also what he expects from lawyers and how they treat and act around him, and just some nuggets of wisdom that he has provided for me just in these 3 months that I've been working with him. Another big pro is my hours are very stable. I think you hear these horror stories about attorneys working these ungodly hours. And for me, I'm in my first year of marriage, and that's like the most important thing right now. And I'm very thankful. I go work 8:30ish to 5:30ish. I have the flexibility to, like right now, I'm taking my lunch break and get to come and do something like this. I get a lunch break every day. It allows me and my wife to volunteer in the community and spend time with our family and friends. And I'll remain in this position till August 2027. So the next question is, what's next? That's coming up. It's a year and 8 months away. And the answer is I'm still unsure. I don't have anything planned concretely just yet. As I noted earlier, my desire in going to law school, it hasn't changed throughout. I want to find a way to provide legal services to those who otherwise would not be able to have access or afford them. Are any of y'all familiar with Mercy Med in Columbus? Yeah, somewhat. Mercy Med is basically a nonprofit medical clinic that exists to provide medical services to those who couldn't afford them in the name of Jesus. And so for law, my dream is to open up Mercy Law long term, and my vision is to function basically the exact same as Mercy Med, providing legal services to those who otherwise would not have access to them in the name of Jesus, with a focus on this quartet of the vulnerable that I talked about earlier: the poor, the fatherless, the foreigner, and the widow. And I think this could especially be impactful in Columbus. Poverty rate is an estimated 18.5% here in Columbus, which is about 1.4 times the national average and the average in the state of Georgia. And almost all of those people below the poverty rate, they won't be able to afford an attorney. And many who are just above it also wouldn't be able to afford an attorney. I mean, attorneys charge, and nothing wrong with this, it's just the market rate. They charge hundreds of dollars an hour to do work. And if you're making minimum wage, it's kind of hard to afford that. And I'll share some stats that also show without a lawyer, the odds of success in lawsuits are not super high. So one study shows that pro se litigants, who are those who are without an attorney, who go before federal district courts, which is where I work now, lose 80 to 90% of their cases. In family law specifically, which Tom works a little bit in, one study found that 72% of people actually aren't, at least in 72% of cases, at least one party is not represented by an attorney. And I think that, or my belief is that these people may lose a lot of cases, but it's not necessarily because the facts of their cases are losers. It's not because the law doesn't grant them relief. It's because they just can't afford to navigate the system, and it's pretty complicated, and they don't have an access to it. And so my dream is not to try to radically transform the system or try to change the law. my dream is just to serve as an advocate for those who otherwise wouldn't be able to do so, and to help change these numbers and to provide a voice for those who otherwise wouldn't have a voice in court. And thankfully, there were others like Tom who are already doing this and have offered and are willing to help me in this endeavor to try to get this dream of mercy law started. So questions that I wrestle with about starting this clinic, wrestle with them every day, is number one, am I ready? Do I need more experience? I mean, I'm 25. I haven't actually, I've represented a couple attorneys or a couple clients in court, but it's something I wrestle with. Number two, funding. How can it be sustainable? I mean, at the end of the day, I've got a wife. We want kids one day, and I've got to find a way to put food on the table. And so that's also an important factor in looking into ways and how to fund a clinic like this. And number three, what areas of law should I focus on? Law is very broad, and it's very hard to specialize in one thing. And I don't want to be a jack of all trades and a master of none. I'd like to be the best attorney I can be in whatever areas of law I practice. And so I would need to figure out what I want to specialize in and probably recruit a lot of help from around the Columbus area for attorneys who would want to volunteer their services. Long story short, I don't know the answers to these questions yet. These are ones that, again, I wrestle with every day. My hope and dream still remains the same, and I hope I continue to do everything I can to make this dream a reality. And so I'm going to close with just a few tidbits. I kind of wanted to just put myself in y'all's shoes and just say, I was in y'all's shoes 4 years ago, or some of y'all's maybe a little longer, depending on what year y'all are. But I've kind of grouped them into like different stages of life for me. Of these are things that I wish I would have known when I was in y'all's shoes. And I try to apply these tidbits, and I don't do it perfectly, but I try to apply them to my life now. So kind of in college, where y'all are at right now, I'll tell you to go find something you're truly passionate about. Find what makes you fired up. I think the world needs more people who really care about what they want to do in their future and aren't just counting down the clock. Now, I do want to throw a caveat in this. Don't be a parked car and just put yourself in park until you find something you're passionate about. I think it's important we always are doing something and working towards the right direction. But don't be afraid to chase what your true interests are, even if it may not make logistical sense at the time. Number two is kind of going off this. I'd encourage you to find your why, find your purpose. I think a lot of times that can be putting yourself in the future and saying, why are you here? Like, what is your purpose here on earth? What do you want to be remembered for one day when people are reading whatever they're reading at your funerals? It's kind of dire, but I think it's important to try to connect your everyday words and actions to this why, to this purpose in the future, so you can actually one day achieve what you would set out to achieve. And number three, which is a bit, and I don't think they're actually in conflict with each other, but also this is the most free time you'll probably have in your life. So enjoy yourself. Don't take yourself too seriously. I just kind of gave two big picture, big thinking tidbits. And this one's, it's okay if you don't have it all figured out. I didn't when I was y'all's age, and I still wonder if I do now. But take advantage of this free time and make sure you're enjoying this time. For law school, for those of you who are interested, I'll just have two little tidbits. This is one that my aunt gave me, who, like I said, was an attorney. Don't go to law school if you don't want to be a lawyer. I knew some people who just wanted to go to law school because it looked good on their resume, and they were miserable, and some of them didn't make it through. I was very thankful for that, because I wanted to make sure before I ever went to law school that this is what I wanted to do. Number two is treat it like a full-time job, but don't let it consume you. I kind of touched on this. Basically, how the law school grading system works is you're graded on a curve relative to everyone else in the class. So it'd be like in this class, how many people are?
25.
25 people. So the average grade has to come out to a maximum a 3.2 GPA. And so by sheer numbers, only so many people of y'all could get A's, so many of y'all could get A minuses, so many could get B pluses and onwards. And there's going to be some people who have to get C's. So it's kind of stressful. And I think one thing I had to tell myself going into law school was my worth is not how I stack up is not how I compare to my classmates in law school. I want to ultimately work hard because it's what I think I'm called to do, and work to the best of my abilities without letting it become an idol or consume me. And Tom, before I went off to law school, I remember he gave this advice to me. I think he said his first year, he quote unquote didn't even see the seasons change. Mm-hmm. So I took this very literally and studied outside all the time. My first year of law school, so I could see the seasons change. But I thought that advice was very helpful for me. Is yes, work hard, but work for your own benefit, because ultimately you're not working to try to. My job as a lawyer in law school is not to try to see how high I could rank in the class. It was to try to make myself the best lawyer I could be going forward. And then in career, 2 more tidbits in career, and then I'm done. Some great advice I got from a mentor of mine was to, quote unquote, do what's expected and then some. He had a lot of success in the real estate industry, and he had talked to me and said, Trent, who am I going to trust to run the company? The one who can't wait to punch out at 5, or the one that's willing to put in some extra work when it's needed? And so that's whatever you do it 100%, and then some. And then the second thing is, and my last tidbit, and I think probably the most important, is treat everyone, no matter their status, with the same respect and dignity that they deserve. In the legal profession, I feel like I've seen this a lot with just the judge I work for. He's one of the more prominent legal figures in the community. And how people completely change how they usually are to try to impress him or suck up to him. And I would encourage you all to treat the janitor as the same way you would a judge. I know my judge does not like when he feels that people are being superficial and are treating him in a way that they wouldn't treat others. So what I would tell y'all and encourage y'all to do, and something I try to live out, is however you would want others to treat you, go and treat others like that, regardless of what their status is or whether they will help you climb the rungs in whatever you want to do. So that is all I had. Thank you all for listening. I hope this was somewhat helpful. Y'all able to take a little bit out of it. I'm happy to answer any questions on anything y'all may have.
Thank you, Trent. That was great. I know I learned some things I didn't know. So I want to tie in a couple things we talked about before we open it up for questions. I want to say to you that Trent's idea about the mercy law and providing legal services to those who can't afford it is tremendous. And you might be thinking, well, doesn't somebody else do that? There is a group called Legal Aid that's a Georgia, a state entity, but they're very understaffed and there's only so much they can do. So we do have something like that, but it doesn't have near the reach that Trent's would. And Trent's would be more independent, and he would be able to sort of tailor it how he wants to and not have to answer to a state agency or something like that. He'd have a little more freedom to operate how he wants to. I think it's a tremendous idea. I know there's a need because I see it every day, and I'm real thankful that that he's felt a calling to try to fill some of that void. So I'm excited about seeing where that goes. The second thing I want to say is, didn't Cease Clinic work on that Red Roof Inn case?
Yeah, they did.
Okay, that wasn't the one you were talking about, though.
No, this was a different one that actually came down.
So if y'all were, if y'all heard about this, it's not too long ago, but some sex traffickers were always using the same hotel in Atlanta. Was it Red Roof Inn?
Yeah,
I don't want to get sued for
defamation.
Right? We studied that. They were using this Red Roof Inn, and the victims got together and Cease Clinic. Did they bring the case or did they help with the case?
I think I can't remember, to be honest.
Remember that. Anyway, they were involved in it, and they sued Red Roof Inn's parent company. And you might be thinking, well, how's that Red Roof Inn's fault? Well, I think they used the theory of negligence, right? What is the duty of care that the hotel company has, right? In this area, it would be to not allow criminal activity on their premises. Right? I mean, they can't necessarily prevent something going on in a room behind closed doors that they don't know about. But the theory was they knew about it. It happened so often, and the volume was so much that there's no way they didn't know what was going on, and they didn't do anything to stop it. And they won a huge verdict. I can't remember what it is, but
it was
really
a couple
big
million.
verdict, couple million against Red Roof Inn. So in the business sense, as the owner of that business, they had a duty to not allow criminal activity that they knew about and could have done something about. So that ties in a little bit about to some of the things we talked about. All right, we've got time for questions. So what questions do y'all have for Trent? Damien.
What was the name of that program that you used to get into law school?
Yeah, so it's called the Scholars Program. So I actually, the dean of Georgia Law School came down to visit with Judge Land and was telling me, because when I was going through, it was only UGA students it was open to. But she informed me that to try to get a broader reach of Georgia students that represent better the entire population of college students within the state of Georgia, they've opened it up to USG students. So any college, including Columbus State, that's associated with the university systems of Georgia. So basically it's, if your GPA is above a 3.5 and your national testing score is in, your testing score is in the 85th percentile or better nationally, you're eligible to apply.
Testing of what?
That's going to be your ACT, SAT.
Oh,
So they look at your high school scores, or you can take the GRE, so they can also look at that.
But you didn't have to take the LSAT.
I did not have to take it.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah. So the LSAT, if y'all have any questions on that, I can't give you much advice on that. This is kind of a shortcut. The Scholars Program, they allow, I think when I was there, it was usually between 15 and 20 students a year into this. And it's not like an automatic. It's once you apply, they then look through applications and choose a select amount of people through that.
And then you heard in October from that program, but most everybody else didn't hear that they got in until the spring, right?
Yes, or it's kind of rolling admissions. So the beautiful thing about it is it's basically a free, if any of y'all are interested, it's like a free first try at it, first swing at it. So one thing I should make clear, you are not allowed to take the LSAT before applying to it. But they give you the scores back. They give you whether you got in or not in that first week of October. And so theoretically, I could have then gone and signed up for an LSAT in November or December and applied just the old-fashioned way. It doesn't, if I didn't get into the Scholars Program, it wouldn't have cost me my chance of getting in regular by taking the LSAT. But
Gotcha.
You're not allowed to take the LSAT and still apply for the Scholars Program.
That's interesting. I'd never heard that there was a shortcut that way. That's cool.
Yeah, it's very nice.
I like that. All right, what else? Miss Miles.
So when you were working on the case of the lady who had domestic violence,
Yeah.
she wanted like court order against the guy,
Yeah,
and then it was like, oh, never mind, I'll just go back with him.
yeah.
We talked about in class, I forgot what law it was, but where you can't make the decision for them, but you could nudge them
Yeah.
to the correct decision. Where I know she decided like, oh, I'll just go back with him, but like, did you at least like nudge her?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. We tried everything we could have we told her we think this is not a good idea. We think you should go through this protective order for your own safety. And she was like, no, I don't want to. And so at that point, it was actually kind of awkward. The best thing we could do, so she didn't get in trouble, was we told her not to show up to the hearing. And then I went to the hearing on her behalf and said, we have lost contact with her. She's not here, so she will not be moving forward with it. And then, because that prevented her from going through a traumatic experience where a judge then chews her out because wasting court resources and yada, yada, yada. And she just didn't need that. So we tried everything we could to nudge, like you said, to nudge her in the direction we thought was best for her. But
Good question.
Yeah.
True.
Back to that scholar program
Yeah.
you were talking about. So my girlfriend, she lives in El Paso, Texas.
Okay.
So we're also long distance.
Yeah.
So
Not fun.
yeah, not really. But for the program,
Yeah.
I know if that's, you might not know, but is that like specifically for Georgia, or do you know if it applies to other states as well?
So I don't know. I know for Georgia law, it only applies to people who went to colleges or universities in Georgia. Now, maybe Texas has an analogous program where they, Texas or Texas A&M Law School or whatever other law schools are over there, maybe they have something similar, but I don't know. I do know, though, that Georgia's only applies to people who went to Georgia.
Is that only for UGA law?
Only for UGA Law,
Okay.
yes. Or to my knowledge, I don't think Emory or Georgia State or Mercer has anything like it. So
Davis.
have to make any changes? No. So I was a finance major in undergrad, and I guess law school is unique in that if I don't know if anyone here wants to go to med school, but med school you have a laundry list of classes that you have that are prerequisites. Law school there were 0 prerequisites, and I did not take. I took like one. I took a business law class when I was in undergrad, and that was the only law class I took. But yeah, there's no set major or anything like that you have to take to go to law school. I guess the only change I made was instead of going to work in finance, I went to law school, and now I'm practicing as an attorney and only use finance for my house finances and budgeting in that regard. So,
Prue.
What were the exams in law school like?
usually not. There was a couple, but that's a good question. They're not very fun. So basically, you get depending on the class either 3 or 4 hours, and they give you these massive fact patterns where there are so many different things that went on, like different injuries.
Remember the one we did with Rusty and Johnny in the convenience store wars? Like that, but like 10 pages of facts.
Yeah, and so it kind of it's a little like law school exams is kind of a hot topic because I don't really think they test your knowledge of the law or whether you're going to be an attorney that well. I mean, maybe it tests your knowledge of working hard, but it turns into a typing competition because it's basically like you have, or at least in most exams, I felt like you had like a certain checklist. Like it's literally they graded on like a point scale, and it's impossible to get every possible point because you literally don't have enough time in those 3 or 4 hours you're allotted. So you just start typing. You just go. It's called the IRAC method, where you're like, the issue here is, did Susie intend to kill Bob? And it's like the rule is that she must show this to have intended to kill Bob. And the application is, okay, here are the facts that align to this rule, don't align to this rule, and here's my conclusion, and you go. And so it's basically these crazy long fact patterns that you have. And it's like spot all the issues in this fact pattern and analyze them under the common law. So, but there are some that were multiple choice, not many though.
Who's next? Riley.
Did you ever kind of doubt whether law was for you, especially like during those times in law school?
It's a great question. I mean, I think ultimately no. I think I was pretty confident that when I made up my mind to go to law school, I was like, this is what I want to do. I'm going to put my mind towards it. Now, there's times where it definitely got hard, November, like Thanksgiving break, this used to be the worst time of the year for me when I was in law school because we had finals. We had 3 or 4 finals coming the next year, and you only get one exam. Another thing about law school exams, you get one exam per semester. And so if you don't have a good 3 or 4 hours, if you're off your A game, you don't have your fastball, you're not going to do well in the class. And so it was stressful in that regard. If there were times where I'm like, man, like this is not very fun. But I don't think I ever doubted my reasoning for going to law school or my desire to become an attorney through my experience in law school. I look back on my 3 years pretty fondly, I would say. I don't know if that answers your question.
Damien.
How did you support yourself financially? I'm sure you got loans.
Yeah.
Pay for tuition.
Yeah.
Outside of that, what did you do?
I lived crazy cheaply. I would go and I worked as a TA my second year, so I had a little bit of income, and then I worked these summer jobs. But honestly, my first year summer went to my wife's finger. That's where that money went to get a ring for her. And then my second year summer, it went to mostly our honeymoon. And I would have a little bit left over, that just enough to kind of live off of. But yeah, I had some scholarships going in, but at a certain point, I think my second year, I had to start taking out loans. But Georgia I was a dean's ambassador for them, so I would basically recruit people would come, y'all go on tours, and I'd be the one that showed you around. And it is seen as the best value law school in the country. I think it's rated number 22 right now, and it's the only one where in-state tuition is under $20,000 a year. And so, unlike a lot of these other
crazy.
top 20 law schools where you're having to pay $75,000 a year, you pay $20,000 a year max, and that's with no scholarships. So, yes, I mean, there were. I lived very cheaply. I had cheap rent, and I would cook in bulk and just eat cheap. And but I did have to take out a little bit of loans, although it's not crippling debt or anything like that.
Ms. O'Hara.
Were there any strategies that you used to study for exams?
Yeah, there's two big things that you hear about in law school. Number one is outlining, which is super helpful. And so that's where I would go to class and I'd take my notes in class and I'd have my own notes. I started just taking notes with a book. And then you basically I would usually start 5-6 weeks out. I'd start compiling all of my notes that I've taken on cases into what are the actual rules of law that they have. And they have universal outlines that you can use, and it's perfectly, like, it's not against the rules. And I would use, a prior student's outline, and I would build my own outline off that. And then when I got like this time, Thanksgiving break, I would start hammering practice tests, which were no fun. So that's why I say I don't think Thanksgiving break was never very fun for me in law school because I was usually taking practice tests. But those are the two big things I would say. And I read a lot. You have to read a lot. Some people would take their chances and not read. And I always read for class because you get cold called and it can be kind of intimidating if you don't know what you're talking about. So,
My honor.
Do you ever watch law shows the two that I can think of off the top of my head is How to Get Away with Murder
yeah.
and Scandal? Do you ever watch the shows and be like, oh, I know exactly what they're gonna do, or I know exactly what this law is?
Yeah. No, I don't. So there was this one. What was the show called? Suits. It was huge with Harvey. I know I watched like an episode with my parents, but my parents, my mother-in-law, my friends were like, Trent, you've got to watch this show. And my response to them was always, I spent enough time studying the law. I don't know if I necessarily want to watch a show about the law.
I love Suits, but it has nothing. I mean,
I've heard it's not
resolve major things in 45 minutes. And it's just like that's not how it works.
Yeah.
But
it's pretty drawn out
process.
Show. Yeah. I've definitely watched some episodes before, but no, I would not say I frequently.
Law and Order is more accurate in terms of like what happens in a courtroom and some of the legal arguments that they make, but they gloss it up. It's not always that dramatic. It's very often not that dramatic, and they speed it up and they take out a lot of the things that would be harder. So more realistic, but still not what you're going to find if you walked into a courtroom today.
Yeah, it's usually not. Unfortunately, it's not very dramatic.
Have you seen any good stuff in the courtroom yet?
I think, like in working for Judge Land. I mean, there's some. It's not necessarily in the courtroom. I think a lot of times what I'm working on is like motion practice, which is where people file motions. I'm doing research and writing, trying to figure out if those motions have merit. And there's some attorneys who miss deadlines, and that's a major no-no. And I've heard Judge Land issued an order. I mean, it's public, so now I can talk about it. But he issued an order last week where he just ripped into an attorney who had missed multiple deadlines. And then the attorney came and appeared before him in a different case. And he was you could tell he was a little nervous. He was he was a little rattled after getting completely ripped a new one in an order. So
what are you seeing a lot of employment discrimination cases so far?
Yeah, I would say in federal court, employment discrimination is definitely. Do y'all know the rules to get how you have to get into federal court? Did y'all?
You mean on a discrimination case?
Or no, just like what are the two ways which a federal court has like jurisdiction?
On a very high level.
Okay, so I'll do it high, but it's basically there's two ways. So you can always state court. It's a court of general jurisdiction where you can pretty much file anything in state court. And federal court, there's two ways. Either there's a cause of action that arises under a federal law or the Constitution. So like employment cases, that's all federal law, and I do see a good bit of those. Or there's called diversity jurisdiction. So it's basically if the plaintiff and the defendant are citizens of different states and the amount in controversy is greater than $75,000. So those are the only two ways in which you can get a case in federal court. So yeah, I've seen a good amount of employment discrimination. I've seen some high dollar personal injury cases between people of different or entities of different states. A lot of times it's a plaintiff suing a corporation or something like that.
In employment discrimination cases, it's pretty common for the defendant to ask the court for something called summary judgment, which means you say to the court, even if everything they said is true, they still don't have a case. There's just no evidence to support it. And it's pretty common practice for the defense lawyers to ask for that. So when Trent gets a motion for summary judgment, he's got to go back and dig into what the actual facts are in the record. So he's looking at depositions and discovery and all those things we talked about. And he's going back and reading through what people said under oath in their depositions and that kind of thing. So all that stuff, I mean, I try to hammer home to him that what you say and what you write, I mean, it comes back.
That I would say that's one of just my personal pet peeves or biggest things I've seen is the amount of attorneys who misquote things. It drives me insane because, and then, I mean, I'll be frank, it leaves, whenever they start misquoting stuff or misstating the law, like we go back and check everything they say. And if I'm like, that's not what that says, then everything they do after that, I'm always going to be looking under, you know, I'll have them under a microscope saying, you've tried to fool me once. I know you're probably going to try to do it again.
You know, like they may say in his deposition, Mr. Tebow said this. Well, I mean, Trent can go back and look at the deposition and say, well, that's not what he said, or that is what he said, but you've taken it out of context or you've manipulated it somehow. Lawyers are getting caught now using AI to write their submissions to court, and AI is making up stuff that doesn't exist. Like they are using cases that we talked about that we use as precedent that we cite to the court if they support our position. AI is making up cases that don't exist. So what Trent and some people in his position are figuring out is they're going back and they're saying, well, you said this case stands for this and that supports your case. Well, I'm looking up this case and it doesn't exist. And so that, I mean, I personally think lawyers should be suspended or disbarred for making up cases, but that is something that's coming out more. And so is Judge Land tasking you with, I mean, I guess you always are looking at their authority they cite, but I mean, is that an extra thing you're having to look at now is make sure that these are real?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's just included because they have to cite, you have like a proper citation you have to use and they'll cite to the case. And so every case they cite to, I'm going to go read.
You're going to go
And so if I look it up, I haven't actually had this happen yet, but I know it's happened around courts around the country, but I'll look up the case. And then if the case doesn't exist, I'd be like, that case may not be either A, it's miscited, or B, they just made one up.
Be the fastest way to lose your credibility, not just with the judge you're in front of, but really in the legal community as a whole. Other questions? Emily.
First, thank you for sharing your story.
Oh, of course.
I found out recently that there are therapists that talk to other therapists or counselors, especially when they have patients where they hear tough stories. Relating that to the law side, when you take on cases and things like that, are there stories that you hear when after you're done with it? Do you think it's sometimes hard for you to let it go, or do they really stick with you?
Yeah.
Does that affect like your mental health and things like that?
That's a great question. So those two clinics I mentioned, the Family Justice and the Cease Clinic, we actually, we would do modules on that where we'd read studies and watch videos about, you know, obviously they're going through traumatic experience. It's called secondary trauma. And it's, lawyers are susceptible to that. And so I think for me, it was, I mean, you hear some hard things and they're going to affect you, but I feel like there's a difference between letting it affect you like in a negative light where it's like you start to become depressed and then start to negatively affect your workplace as opposed to, okay, like this is horrendous. Something needs to change and it spurs you spurs you to try to take positive actions. And for me, I mean, I think it's, everyone has different coping mechanisms. Exercise is a big one for me. Like there would be times where, I'd meet with clients and it'd be a really hard case and I'd just go for a run afterwards. It was just like, just to clear my head and get, just start, I don't know, doing something physically. But yeah, it's a huge issue for sure, especially and one that I'm like in this line of work that I want to go to, I am very cognizant of like, okay, this is, this can be, you hear some really, really hard stuff. But the Cease Clinic that I worked for, they actually, it was really cool what they did. They had a, I'm blanking on the actual title of it, but it was a therapist. It was essentially a therapist. I can't remember exactly what her like master's was in, but she was a therapist that was on staff that worked with these victims of child sexual abuse, and that you were also able to go talk to if something, if you felt like you were getting negatively affected just by hearing your hard story. So, wonderful question.
What's your favorite color?
Blue.
Blue. Everybody hear that? Blue. All right, we're short on time, so let's do rapid fire takeaways, things you learned today. Levi, kick us off.
Sorry.
I know I started with you. I put you on the spot.
I was interesting. You said Montana.
Yeah.
That kind of makes me want to do something like that.
Pretty sweet.
Nice.
Best time of your life to do it.
Davis. Mayana. There you go. Scarlett.
His favorite color is blue.
All right, Rebecca.
Your faith is a big driving force for and she wanted it.
Damien.
Sometimes path isn't always clear, but just keep pushing through it.
All right, Riley.
Do everything 100% and then some.
Good. Prue.
Don't let your work take over your life.
Cody.
You want to say you said you want a mission trip to India?
Yeah.
You almost died. That's
Yeah,
another
I-
story.
I
You might
I-
want to hear about that after.
I got cholera during it, but we made it.
Austin.
To be a good reason to be the one.
All right. Other Austin.
Sometimes you just got to spend the summer in Montana.
Love it. Drew.
I think it's awesome that you want to help people who may not have that help usually.
Emily.
It's okay to not have everything figured out right away.
Mr. Coley.
Treat people how you want to be treated.
Good.
Take your time when it comes to college, but also like don't focus completely on college, but also like branch out and do something.
Thank you, Ms. Hill. Autumn.
You don't have to do a specific major in college to be able to go to law school.
There you go. Quarles.
He's married.
Tamara.
When you're passionate about something, just go for it. Don't do it just because.
All right, Garrett.
I was going to say, find something that you're passionate about and then make sure you have enough money for the
Jace.
experience life is in front of you.
All right, Mr. Kelly, wrap us up. I mean, Mr. Jones. I'm sorry. Other Garrett.
Find your why.
All right. Thank y'all very much. I appreciate y'all.
Thank y'all.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief.
Absolutely.
Appreciate
That
it.
was awesome. Thank you.
Feels like that.
I know. How
I was curious as to how long it ended up being.